Great. Thanks, Bill.
So are we all set on recording now?
We are.
Great. Well, thanks for everybody for joining us. It's great to have so many people interested, and in particular, so many folks that we haven't heard from before. And really hoping that not only listening, but some of you will jump in with questions, comments. We just want to have a great discussion today and hear from you as well as hearing from us. As part of that, we really do want to get questions. So with the number of people signed in, what I'd suggest is that the two best ways if you want to ask a question is first, go down to the bottom of your screen where you have the hand held up and just click on that. And I'll be monitoring that, and we'll just, let the speaker know that somebody's got a question. You can go ahead and ask that. If that's not working for you or you prefer, jump into chat and put your question in there. And again, I'll be monitoring that also, and just make sure those questions get out. And periodically, the speakers are going to be asking for questions as well. So lots of different ways, but raise your hand or put it in the chat just to make sure we get every question answered.
And we should have a fair bit of time at the end to do some Q&A and just discussion. Great. Should we get started?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. My name is PJ Benenati. I'm the interim chair of the Maryland Forward Party. I'm out in Baltimore, but grew up in Frederick. We've got some really exciting stuff happening right now with Maryland Forward Party, specifically here in the state. Nationally, we just got through obviously a big election cycle. The National Forward Party did pretty well nationally. I don't know if everybody's tracking, but I think they ran nationally maybe about 150 candidates or so. I think they had like a 20% hit rate for wins across the state. And for a first election cycle, that's pretty good. And that includes, I think, 2 or 3 congressional wins. I know one in North Carolina. I believe there's 2 others as well. So those are forward-aligned candidates in most cases, where we're starting to, even though it's such a small impact right now, it's a foot in the door and at the national level. Locally, we have a few wins here in Maryland. We have a school board winner in Frederick County who just won this election cycle. We have a candidate who ran with us last year in the city of Laurel, who is now the president of the city council there. So we have a couple of local wins here, which is pretty exciting. We're starting local, building local, and that's a big part of what our intent is. Tonight we're really focused on ranked choice voting. Just a quick show of hands, and maybe in the chat you can say yes or no. Say yes if you're familiar with ranked choice voting, and no if you're less familiar. Chat should be in the lower right hand corner. So as you're doing that, that'll kind of give us a gauge of how much detail to go into some of this. Some things you might be able to go through pretty quickly if everybody's familiar. That'll leave a little more time for discussion. Maryland Forward Party is a new political party. At the end of the day, we're really looking at a better, more authentic form of representation. There's a lot of people out there who don't feel like they're being heard by both sides of the political spectrum right now. There's a lot of politicking happening, a lot of talk about issues, and not a lot of action on issues. What Forward Party is trying to do is break that stalemate. By breaking away from the one-size-fits-all policy platform, we think we actually have a chance of making real impact. Our communities are more complex and more diverse than they've ever been. And so the one-size-fits-all platform is not a super responsive way to work at the local issue within our communities. So instead, we ask our elected officials to talk with their constituents, find out what the real issues are, and be able to target those issues. And sometimes that means, through the traditional sense, they might lean more liberally, moderately, or conservatively on any specific issue. And that's okay. And that's what makes us truly a unique, new type of organization. We want that level of flexibility. We want that level of nuance, problem solving. Otherwise, we're back to yes or no and no discussion. Where this really hit, where the metal hits the road, is that what it's called? I'm bad with expressions, but this is really going to come down to our legislative priorities. In Maryland, we have three main legislative priorities. Open single primaries. This is where we believe every person who wants to participate in this process should have an opportunity to do so. Right now, 20% of our voters in Maryland who are taxpayers are not allowed to participate in publicly funded primary elections in Maryland. And we think that all taxpayers should be able to do that. Gerrymandering is a big problem in Maryland as well. Maryland is one of the top 5 worst gerrymandered states in the country. And that's shameful. So we believe that voters should be picking our elected officials and not the other way around. And so nonpartisan redistricting commissions is a high priority for us. And then the final of the 3 is voting election reforms like ranked choice voting. And we have now identified ranked choice voting as our top election reform because it's got name recognition, and in some ways, because it's got some traction at the local level already, it's the lowest hanging fruit of all 3 of these right now. Okay, next slide. Right now we have a board of 11 members, and it's a mix of registered Republicans, Democrats, and independents. It just kind of worked out that way that it's almost an even split across the board. That's not an intentional thing. And while we don't agree on every single decision all the time, I think very rarely have we ever come to a decision that we're not all proud of. And that's the way we talk about things. It's the way we problem solve together. And it gets to the heart of what Forward Party is trying to do and trying to accomplish. We are looking to grow this team over the next couple of years here. So, as people start to get more involved and get more interested in Forward Party, there's lots of room at the table as we start to build and grow our leadership team. Next slide. As part of this growth, we're going to be building our next tier of leadership at the state or the county level. So we're going to be establishing county leads in counties across the state. Those county leads will eventually start to build local county teams, and then we'll start our targeted local growth from there. We don't want to pile on too much for any volunteer. This is all volunteer based right now. So we don't want to pile on too much too quickly to anybody. So we're doing this very incrementally right now. But we are trying to establish just a point of connection within the county that if people have questions, they can reach out to and connect with. And we can keep some localized engagement kind of established as we build momentum. Right now, we're established in kind of that medium orange right now, and we have, which is like Frederick, Prince George's, Anne Arundel, Baltimore City. But what's exciting is we just had 3 new leads join us within the last few weeks. Peter Ward is on the call with us tonight. He's our new county lead in Howard County. And then we have Adam Wise, who's a board member who's going to be taking over Montgomery County, which is going to be great for us. And then a new leader as well in Washington County. And then a few leads throughout other parts of the state as well. Okay, next slide. Committee-wise, these are kind of our most active committees right now. And they're doing all kinds of different things simultaneously, but within kind of a targeted realm. We are trying to focus on some key locations right now across the state. We think Frederick County and Anne Arundel County are actually in some ways the most purple counties in the state. So we're going to be targeting some efforts around those counties over the next year as we look at our growth plan. Not to say we won't be doing events everywhere else. Personally, I live in Baltimore, so both of those are, in different directions. But, while we're young and growing, we want to kind of focus our resources wherever we can get the most impact. The priorities team is looking at local issues. That's how we can get involved without taking a one-size-fits-all policy stance. What Forward Party can offer instead is bring local experts to the table for these local, hyper-local issues where we really won't be expected to be the experts. In fact, we could do more damage by pretending we're the experts. So instead, we want to pull all these different voices together and help echo the issue and be that megaphone for awareness. That'll help inform voters and help inform elected officials through that process. And that's how we can be active at the local scale. Legislative affairs is really going to be focusing on those 3 legislative priorities. We're doing that several different ways, both at kind of a grassroots level and also at a grass tops level, working with local and state legislators. We're working with candidates throughout the state, and we'll continue to do so over the next year. This is a big local election year in 2025. So we'll be looking at local elections all across the state. So if you know anybody interested in running, somebody who is running that we should talk to, please feel free to give us names or connect us with people. We have a pretty rigorous process of interviewing and working with candidates to see if it's the right fit, to see if our values align. But we can start that process at any point if we have candidates out there. Communications, fundraising, and outreach are all kind of working in simultaneous coordination. And that's a lot of the ways, the backbone that connect all these other things together. Next slide. So like I said, these are our 3 priorities right now in Maryland. The single open primaries. Next one, you can flip through these, Matt. These are the independent redistricting commissions to combat gerrymandering in Maryland. And then the last one brings us to tonight, where we're really going to be focused on ranked choice voting as we move ahead. Okay. Matt, I'll hand it over to you. You can start to walk us through kind of some of the mechanics. It looks like most people have some level of understanding of kind of what we're looking at tonight.
Cool. Thanks, PJ. Really appreciate that introduction. A really good overview for what we're doing and where we're going, and appreciate that. So I'm Matt Byers. I'm a member of the board, and I'm going to talk to you about ranked choice voting tonight and try to answer some questions and provide some insights into why we think this is kind of the way to go. And I cannot see if we have any questions because I'm also sharing the slides. So if there are questions, if somebody would let me know, I'd really appreciate it.
We'll let you know.
I'm monitoring and I will let you know.
Excellente. All right. So ranked choice voting. Oop. Come on, go to the slides. Okay. Why do we need reform in the first place? That's really the question here. Why ranked choice voting? Why star voting? Why approval voting? Any of it? Why do we need reform in the United States? Well, we have limited voter choice. We usually can choose one or the other party. We have a lot of people feel tied to that, like they're throwing away their vote if they vote for any other party. So their voter choice is limited. People do vote splitting and strategic voting in the primaries. We often get non-majority winners. If you look at the primary elections, you often see people elected to the primary spot with 13% of the vote. It's just really crazy. It's a toxic campaign cycle. All of you have experienced this. What we just went through was like really heartbreaking and heart-rendering. Like everybody felt really bad at the end. It doesn't matter which side you were on. And that's part of the problem, is it's sides. It causes political polarization, going back to the sides. So you're either on the left or you're on the right. There's no middle ground. The elections are non-competitive. You know, Andrew Yang likes to quote an interesting statistics that Congress has an approval rating of less than 25% and a re-election percentage of 95%. And why is that? Because it's non-competitive. And that's a result of gerrymandering. So, and then people often feel that they have a lack of representation. And why do they have a lack of representation? Because they have a lack of choice. So improving the way we vote changing the way we do politics will address a lot of these issues. So ranked choice voting in specific, you get the option, if you use ranked choice voting, to rank your candidates in the order of your preference. I want candidate A first. I want candidate C second. I want candidate B third, et cetera, et cetera. Ranked choice voting promotes majority winners. So, in fact, it almost always guarantees a majority winner. You'd have to have a really weird scenario where there isn't a majority winner. In primaries, different issue. But in the general election, you always get a majority winner. And why is that? Because you go through runoffs instantly using your choices until you get a majority winner. So we eliminate the 26% or the 49.8% person that got elected because they have to get 50% plus one. And it's a simple change with powerful impacts for our democracy. So I sort of alluded to the sample ballot before, but here's a sample ballot. So we got 4 people on the ballot. We have a write-in candidate. So we got George Harrison, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr. And this particular individual wrote that they wanted to have Bob Dylan in as well. So they wanted Bob Dylan as a candidate. So obviously ranked choice voting allows for write-in candidates. So there's no problem there. So how do you fill this out? You fill in the bubble, and all of us have done bubble forms for years now in school. So this is not really all that confusing. Where your candidate that you want first, you fill in the column where they're first, and the candidate that you want second, you fill in second, and third, and fourth, and fifth, etc. This is pretty straightforward and simple. So what happens when we do this? Well, we go through rounds of voting, okay, and rounds of counting those votes. Actually, we go through one vote. Okay, there's only one vote, but we go through rounds of counting the votes and then eliminating votes that aren't valid, haven't reached the threshold, and then we take those people's second choices and then eventually their third choices if the candidate still doesn't win, and so forth. So we see in the first round, George got 40% of the vote, John got 30% of the vote, Paul got 20, and Ringo got 10. We're not even going to talk about Bob Dylan. So obviously, Ringo is the least popular. So we're going to take Ringo's votes and we're going to redistribute. So we're going to look at all the people that voted for Ringo as their first choice. And we're going to say, what was your second choice? If you didn't want Ringo, what was your second choice? And so we go, and some of the people wanted George, some of the people wanted John. Doesn't look like anybody wanted Paul. So those Ringo votes get redistributed to George and John. Okay, that seems reasonable. Nobody lost their vote, right? Nobody voted more than once, did they? So, unfortunately, Paul is still not the most popular, and he has a lower percentage than George and John. And so we drop Paul off the list.
And you're still not at 50%.
And you're still not at 50%, exactly. So 42 and 38 is not 50%. So we drop Paul off the list and we take Paul's votes and we look at their second choice. And there were no second choice votes for Paul from Ringo, so we don't need to look at their third choice. So that's okay. But we'll look at who voted for Paul and what their second choice was. And what we find in this example is that of those 20% of the voters, most of them voted for George. And a few more voted for John. But enough voted for George that it threw him over the threshold, and so he's got more than 50%. Don't pay any attention to the text at the bottom of the screen. It's just wrong. It was for a different example. We'll fix that later. So George ends up getting more than 50% of the vote, which is the whole point. And you see that when you eliminate it down to 2 candidates, you have to get there mathematically. There's just no way around it. So RCV transforms elections. That is statistically valid. we can see here in figure 1 that these are all 4 cities that are using ranked choice voting. And we can see that in purple is the number of people of color who were on the council before RCV. And we can see the number of people in orange of color. Sorry, the number in orange of the people of color who are now on the council. And we can see that is a tremendous growth in representation of people of color. And we also see in figure 2, women. So same basic colors and ideas, women in pre-RCV in purple and women in orange now after RCV has been instated. So definitely an increase in both women and people of color, which indicates diversity. And obviously representing the voters more. So ranked choice voting allows for more choices without having candidates split the vote. So there's no chance that you're throwing away your vote. You get your second choice, you get your third choice. You're still only voting once. Your vote is just being counted after your first choice is eliminated. So those votes for that first choice get
Matt, we have a question.
Yes, what's the question?
So is RCV more appropriate for primary voting when there's many candidates, or is it also appropriate for general elections with fewer candidates?
I would say both. So one of the things that we've talked about as a legislative priority that PJ mentioned was nonpartisan or single primaries. And the idea there, is, as we've seen it enacted in Alaska, is that you do a top 4. So the top 4 candidates. So if we go back to our scenario here, and these are the top 4 candidates, those are the ones that would make it through the primary election. And that's okay. But then those 4 would compete in the general. And so now we can look at this as a general election and go through this scenario, and we narrow it down to 1.
And just to clarify, an open or a single primary is where everybody's in the same bucket together. You put Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Green Party, all in the same bucket. Everybody gets to vote on everybody. So in that case, you could use RCV, like Matt's describing, to vote for this Democrat as your 1, this Republican as your 2, this Libertarian as your 3rd. And that way you're kind of washing away the political party. You know, it still identifies kind of generally where they're heading, but you're focused more on people and policies, and not you're starting to break that down obligation to support the party.
Now, I will say that it would have to be used in combination with voting for multiple positions, and we do that all the time anyway. So here in Frederick, just this past election cycle, we voted for 3 Board of Education candidates out of 7 candidates running. So 3 positions out of 7 candidates. So we had to choose 3. So that's pretty common. We already do this kind of thing. We just add RCV on top of it to allow you to get your first, second, and third choice. And I steer away from the term open primaries because it can often be confused with a scenario like they have in Virginia, where you can vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary by just choosing one or the other. But independents, Libertarians, Green Party are not included in those primaries. So I try to go with the single or nonpartisan primary nomenclature. So getting back to, I hope that answered the question, but if not, then ask it again and I'll try a different tack. So more choices, positive campaigning. So RCV absolutely encourages positive campaigning. One example that we heard in discussions with some of our colleagues was from Tacoma Park, the current mayor of Tacoma Park, or former mayor of Tacoma Park, told the story about how he went campaigning under RCV and would walk up to somebody's door, and within 30 seconds, he knew whether or not they'd vote for him. It's pretty standard. Most politicians would walk away at that point. Well, he didn't, because he said, okay, I understand I'm not your first choice, but could I be your second choice or your third choice? And so it encourages politicians to appeal to a broader segment of voters and to talk with a broader segment of voters so that we have less of the divergence.
Yeah.
And it empowers voters. So RCV empowers voters to make their choices and not to have to choose between the lesser of two evils.
And in that case, that elected official, he won that election because he got enough seconds to support him, which is
Absolutely.
pretty wild.
Thank you. So this is on to you for a bit, PJ.
Yeah, so this is growing in momentum across the country right now. These are some of the major cities that are now incorporating ranked choice voting. Like Matt said, Tacoma Park is the only place in Maryland that is doing it officially here right now, and that's been going on for I think 17 years now. It's been a while in Tacoma Park. So pretty good standard, a pretty good case study for us to look at locally. But San Francisco, New York City, St. Paul, Minneapolis, some pretty large jurisdictions, some of the largest, are using this very successfully now. Alaska, Hawaii, and Maine are using it for all of their statewide elections, where a couple of states are doing it more as a local or kind of an opt-in option. Yes, I think as we look ahead here, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to engage, get more involved in this stuff. And Lee Bradshaw, I just wanted to introduce him to everybody. Maybe Lee say just hi in a few words, but Lee's going to be leading our grassroots efforts in some of those other local jurisdictions in Maryland, where we're getting some traction right now. Places like Annapolis and Frederick, Rockville, Hyattsville. These are some of the places in Maryland that are having active grassroots efforts right now. And Lee's going to help be our connection back to a larger campaign across the state. You're muted. You're muted, Lee. Sorry, down at the bottom. There you go.
Yes, hello, everybody. Sorry, I was late. I was on the wrong meeting. But nice to see you all. And yes, this is a new position and a new role for me. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and please feel free to ask questions, because then I'll have to learn my job. Which is Grassroots Coalition. I mean, RCV in Maryland is the first, probably, I guess, the first group that we have more or less formally said we're going to work with, although I think we've been open to it all the way along. So I think there are others too, but I see my job as to find these folks, figure out what the alignment is, and figure out how to work together.
Yeah, and on the next slide here, you can actually see this is what this coalition is looking like right now. And this coalition has been organized. It's called RCV Maryland. It's not a very creative name, I suppose, but it's a really great group of organizations. A lot of these are national and really well-respected pro-democracy organizations. We're really proud to be a partner on this team. They've accepted Forward Party as a full partner, as a coalition member, and we meet monthly with this coalition. I actually met with the coalition today on a call, and they are actively looking at grassroots efforts in some of these local jurisdictions. Definitely looking at a bottom-up, local first, build confidence kind of at the local level, but they are also looking at a statewide legislative approach to more of the grass tops, going through legislative efforts. So we're gearing up right now for the state legislative session that starts in January, where we will be supporting, I think there are at least 2 ranked choice voting bills being proposed this session. There might be a third one that they're looking at as well. But we plan on going down to Annapolis, providing testimony throughout some of the hearings this spring.
And I just want to point out that's an example of how others can get involved is by going to Annapolis and providing testimony.
Yeah, and that could be on behalf of forward party. It could be as an individual. I think the more voices we have in unison talking about ranked choice voting, the faster this will start to get momentum. Montgomery County, I know, will be pursuing their county-wide elections again as a new bill for ranked choice voting. It's been shot down the last couple of years, but it has grown momentum each year that it's been proposed for the last 4 years. Yeah, next slide, Matt.
All right. So there is, of course, opposition to ranked choice voting. The first and foremost opposition that nobody writes about, but should be obvious, is that this empowers other people and other parties, and those parties don't want to lose control. The ones that are in power don't want to lose control. And so they come up with reasons why this is a problem so that they don't have to empower the voters to actually make choices that the voters want to make. So RCV is confusing, is the first argument. And this came out by Maryland Right to Life and a public opposition statement to Senate Bill 493. And the link is at the bottom if you're interested, but you could look it up and there's a whole PDF on it. But I pulled out the 5 reasons that they stated. So they say RCV is confusing. Well, I think most of us make ranked choice votings in our daily life on a regular basis. You know, do I want to go to college A, college B, or college C? Well, I didn't get into college A, so I guess I'm going to college B because that's my second choice. This is kind of, no-brainers. So we saw the ballot. The ballot is not all that confusing. A little bit of thought into it, and you're all good. I think the RCV is confusing argument is the most insulting to my intelligence, because it says that me as a voter, I can't discern it. I'm not smart enough to figure it out, and that kind of insults me. Every vote doesn't count with RCV. Absolutely every vote counts with RCV, more so than under our current first past the post system. I mean, if you vote for, let's face it, I'm not being discriminatory, but if you vote for the Green Party or the Libertarian Party, that's great that you wanted to do that, but they're not going to get elected because the overall majority of people are either Democrats or Republicans, and so your vote doesn't count. But under RCV, it would, because you can vote for your Libertarian or your Green Party candidate, and when they don't pass the threshold on the first try, your vote still counts for your second try, for your second choice, I mean. RCV lowers voter confidence and voter satisfaction. I completely disagree with this. Voter confidence is increased by having a candidate that has a majority of the votes. And voter satisfaction is increased by voters having to be able to vote their choice. RCV disenfranchises minority voters. I think we saw in the previous slides that minority voters are absolutely voting women and people of color into office. So I don't see how they're disenfranchised. And RCV does not foster positive campaigns or increase voter participation. Well, we just talked about an actual viable real world example of how positive campaigning is fostered. And we do see the numbers show increased voter participation with RCV. So I think all of those reasons are invalid, but you're welcome to have your own opinions.
What's pretty interesting about that third one down is, while you may not end up with your top choice winning the election, you're almost certainly going to end up with your second choice or your third choice in most elections. The way that this kind of forms up that way. So most people end up feeling fairly satisfied that one of your top 3 choices ended up passing through the election. So it's kind of just a different perspective, a different way to look at this type of system.
One of the interesting aspects of opposition Alaska passed it a statewide ranked choice voting. And in the November election that we just completed, that was put up to either continue to stand or be done away with. And both the Republicans and Democrats put a major campaign in place to get rid of it because they feel challenged by it. And by a narrow margin, Alaska said, no, we're keeping it.
Yeah. And the reason they feel challenged by it is because in the election cycle before, when the people voted, they chose a Democrat as a representative. And in Alaska, of all places. But that candidate had the most support amongst people overall. Maybe not on the first ballot, but overall. And so the people, in my opinion, chose the candidate that they wanted to have. But that threatens the Republican Party. It threatens the Democratic Party because they don't have control over it anymore. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Let's move on to the next slide. PJ, I think, is it back to you?
We kind of hinted on this already, but these are some of the bills we were down in Annapolis supporting last legislative cycle.
Before we do that, just again, want to just open up. Any folks have any questions?
Yeah, let's pause there.
But
Good call.
Yeah.
please jump in with any questions, comments, concerns, any thoughts that you have. Let's make this a dialogue.
Michael, you're on mute. Just so you know.
Unmuting. Okay.
Ah.
My understanding is that in 4 other states, ranked choice voting was defeated in this last election cycle. And I don't know if you can speak to
Yep.
what happened there and what we can learn from that.
Yeah, we've been tracking that. We've been talking with some of our partner organizations about that too. In those states where it was rejected, it was huge money being put up by the opposition. And so I think to what Matt was describing earlier and what Bill was describing, there is a sense of threat from establishments that this would shake up things too much. And so when Democrats and Republicans, when the only thing they can agree on is putting down a voting reform that, you know, brings more people to the table and encourages diversity, you know, that's kind of a sign of what we saw in those 4 big defeats.
Okay. Thanks.
Which in some ways we took as like a compliment.
Yeah.
You know, anybody supporting RCV was like, that's actually interesting to see the level of effort put in opposition against it.
You know you're a threat when they start actually paying attention to you.
Yeah, Lee.
Just so a question. So is there a case where once ranked choice voting was voted into a locality or state that it was voted out?
Nope, that did
No.
not happen.
So I think what that speaks to is the parties are against it, but the voters are not.
Alaska was the closest, and it came down to the wire, but it ended up staying there as well. And Alaska and Colorado was a big one where they were looking to take like the next step with combining ranked choice voting and open nonpartisan or single primaries together, which is where we would ultimately like to see Maryland go. But they were taking that next like big leap, and so that was like a very big change. But ended up a lot of opposition in that case from the Democratic Party, who had control in that state.
And Nevada actually passed RCV. They have a very interesting constitutional process there, where it had to be passed twice in 2 separate election cycles before it became a law. So 4 years apart, obviously. And so it was passed 4 years ago, and then, like PJ said, all that big money came in to stop it, and so it didn't pass the second time, and they've got to start over again. But it actually did pass in Nevada the first time, at least.
Any other questions that folks have on this? Okay, PJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of these next slides will kind of start to transition more towards like action. You know, we're really starting to look ahead. We want to be action oriented. We want to be problem solvers. We want to get stuff done for Maryland. some of these we're actually seeing some progress on too. And these are not all ranked choice voting related bills here. The purple one in the upper left-hand corner was that Montgomery County bill last cycle that we did provide testimony in support of. But there's another one on here that is actually talking about vacancies. It's the bottom left corner, the cyan one. We're actually making progress on that issue. This is a big problem in Maryland where elections are being bypassed in the state legislature. And I think because pressure has been mounting, not all because of Forward Party, but because of different groups working together and applying pressure on political organizations and elected officials, a key linchpin in that argument has kind of publicly flipped their opinion on this. And we think this has a good chance of passing this time around. So these things take time. These major reforms take time, but we are seeing progress, which is exciting. Matt, next one. And then, a lot of this is going to be grassroots. A lot of it has to come down to educating ourselves, educating our friends and neighbors, talking about ranked choice voting more and more, getting out in the community, sharing information. The grassroots movement is going to be a big part of this. When it starts to boil over at the local level is where I think we'll see confidence at the state level. So this is where we'll be partnering more and more through the coalition, who does have paid staff organizing grassroots efforts, events, farmers markets. They have a bunch of gear. And in that case, we can take off our Forward Party hat and put on the coalition hat and go out and talk about ranked choice voting. And I think that'll be a really exciting way to kind of engage with the community over the next coming year here. Next slide. And then I think beyond this, like for anybody, this is our all volunteer call. And I think a lot of people are learning more about Forward Party. And so you'll want to continue to kind of like check us out and see what we're up to. But, if you are interested in getting more involved, Bill is our rock star. Bill meets with everybody. You guys probably all talked with Bill at some point. And he's really good at finding like what people are excited about. We don't want to throw people into something that's like too intensive or not really aligned with their interests. Any volunteer opportunity we have can be scaled to meet people's interests and availability. If you say you only have an hour a week available and you like research, there's things we have out there that are an hour a week and research oriented. And we can research that towards candidates, recruitment, or policy issues or news articles that we want to post on social media. There's so many ways to potentially plug in depending on what you're excited about, what you're concerned about, which is really exciting. There's so much flexibility right now.
So I put my email address in the chat. So we've got a lot of folks joining us for the first time, and great to have you here, and hope this has been interesting for you, and hope you want to join us again. But if you want to know more about the Forward Party, let me know and we can talk. If you want to know if I ever want to get involved with sponsoring, what would it be like? Happy to talk about that, and when and if you're ready, we'll do that. But just I'm there. Love to talk with you and help you understand more about what we're doing and kind of what you want to do about it.
Yeah.
And for those of you that are familiar with Scouts and may have heard that term an hour a week and been scared by it, that is not what we're talking about here. We actually mean an hour a week.
Yeah, and what's interesting about all this to me is I look back a year and a half ago, I had never done anything political in my entire life. And now I feel maybe the most, even though this was a crazy election cycle that we all just went through, where we saw potentially the most dangerous and unprofessional presidential campaign ever. I am actually more optimistic right now with the things that Forward Party is looking at. There is so much potential for our organization and groups like us to kind of step in and give more choices, empower people, empower our community members. So I'm actually very excited to see where our next year takes us. And we've only got 10 minutes, but yeah.
Open it up to everybody, you know,
Let's stop the
any
recording.
questions on this, yeah. If anything you want to hear from us in an upcoming meeting, any thoughts you have, at any point, bring it up. And at this point, we'll go ahead and turn off the recording. So if folks don't want to